The soft scratching of chalk against pavement filled the quiet night as Marcus Thompson drew a circle, then carefully divided it into equal parts. Ruby's eyes sparkled with understanding despite the dim streetlight. "I get it, Daddy. 4 pieces means everyone gets the same." Charles Whitmore's car had stopped at the red light when he noticed them. A father and daughter, sitting on cardboard, completely absorbed in their lesson. Interesting, Charlie thought. He had seen many homeless people, but never homeless people. Learning, teaching. The light turned green, but Charlie told his driver to pull over to the curb. "Excuse me," he called out, stepping from his car. "It's quite late for studying." Marcus looked up with a quiet smile. "The best learning happens when the world becomes quiet, sir." Charlie smiled, taking several dollars from his wallet and offering them to the little girl. "Here, sweetheart. When tomorrow's dawn comes, buy yourself a book and a pen." The child's eyes lit up brilliantly. The father looked stunned, and the wealthy man disappeared quickly into the night. For weeks afterward, Charles Whitmore found himself taking the same route home from his downtown office each evening. It had become an inexplicable habit, this detour through the older section of the city where the homeless father continued his nightly lessons with his 5-year-old daughter. Charlie told himself it was mere curiosity, nothing more than idle interest in an unusual scene that broke the monotony of his predictable routine. But deep down, he knew there was something about the pair that had captured his attention in a way he couldn't quite explain or dismiss. Each night around 11:30, Charlie would slow his black sedan as it approached the corner of 5th and Madison. There they would be, Marcus and Ruby, settled on their makeshift classroom of flattened cardboard boxes, completely absorbed in whatever subject had captured their focus that evening. Sometimes it was basic arithmetic, with Marcus drawing numbers and symbols on the concrete with pieces of chalk he seemed to acquire from unknown sources. Other nights, Charlie observed geography lessons conducted with hand-drawn maps, or science discussions that involved Ruby collecting leaves and rocks from nearby planters to examine under the dim glow of the street lamp. What struck Charlie most forcefully was the complete dedication both father and daughter brought to these educational sessions. Ruby never seemed restless or distracted, despite the late hour and the uncomfortable circumstances. She listened with the kind of focused attention that most children reserved for their favorite television programs, asking thoughtful questions and working through problems with obvious enthusiasm. Marcus, meanwhile, displayed a patience and gentleness that Charlie found remarkable given their harsh living conditions and uncertain future. The way Marcus taught was unlike anything Charlie had witnessed in traditional educational settings. Every lesson connected to something in Ruby's immediate world, making abstract concepts feel real and important. When teaching fractions, Marcus would break a piece of bread into parts, showing Ruby how division worked in practical terms. When discussing colors, he would point to the different hues of light from neon signs and street lamps, explaining how the human eye perceived various wavelengths. Even something as simple as counting became an exploration of patterns in the sidewalk tiles or the rhythm of passing cars. What moved Charlie most was Marcus's unwavering commitment to treating his daughter's education as sacred, regardless of their circumstances. Despite having no books, no proper classroom, no educational materials beyond scraps of chalk and cardboard, Marcus had created a learning environment that rivaled what many privileged children experienced in expensive private schools. The man's resourcefulness was extraordinary, turning every moment into a potential lesson, every challenge into an opportunity for Ruby to grow intellectually and emotionally. Tonight felt different, though. As Charlie's car approached their usual corner, he noticed Marcus hunched over more than usual, his movements slower and more deliberate than they had been in previous weeks. Ruby sat beside him, as always, but there was something in her posture that suggested concern, a subtle tension that even a 5-year-old couldn't completely hide when sensing her parents' distress. Charlie found himself instructing his driver to pull over, though he wasn't entirely sure what he intended to say or do. As he approached the pair, he could see that Marcus was struggling to maintain his usual composure. His hands shook slightly as he attempted to draw letters on the pavement, and his voice carried a hoarseness that suggested illness or exhaustion beyond simple fatigue. "Good evening," Charlie said softly, not wanting to startle them, but feeling compelled to acknowledge what he was observing. "How are you both doing tonight?" Marcus looked up with recognition, managing a weak smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "We're managing, sir. Just working on Ruby's reading tonight. She's getting so good at recognizing words and understanding their meanings." Despite his obvious physical discomfort, Marcus's voice carried genuine pride in his daughter's progress, the kind of parental satisfaction that transcended their difficult circumstances. Ruby beamed at the praise, but Charlie could see worry flickering in her young eyes as she glanced between her father and the strange man who had begun appearing in their lives with increasing frequency. "Daddy's been feeling sick," she said with the directness that children often display when adults are trying to hide problems that seem obvious to smaller, more observant eyes. The admission hung in the cold night air, and Charlie felt something shift in his chest as he fully absorbed what he was witnessing. This wasn't just poverty or homelessness in the abstract. This was a sick man trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy and educational opportunity for his daughter, while struggling with health problems that he clearly couldn't afford to address properly. "Have you been able to see a doctor?" Charlie asked gently, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Marcus shook his head, his jaw tightening with what appeared to be a mixture of pride and frustration. "Emergency rooms don't exactly prioritize people like us unless it's life-threatening. And even then, they make it clear that we're not welcome to take up space or resources that paying customers might need." His voice carried no bitterness, just a matter-of-fact acceptance of a healthcare system that had apparently failed him repeatedly. Charlie found himself studying Marcus more closely than he had during their previous brief encounters. The man couldn't be much older than Charlie himself, probably somewhere in his early 40s. But the stresses of homelessness and single parenthood had clearly taken a significant toll on his physical health and emotional reserves. Yet, despite his obvious struggles, Marcus continued to prioritize Ruby's education and well-being with a dedication that Charlie found both admirable and heartbreaking. "What kind of work did you do before?" Charlie asked, genuinely curious about the circumstances that had led this obviously caring father into such desperate conditions. "Construction mostly," Marcus replied, his voice growing even more hoarse with the effort of extended conversation. "Good, steady work when it was available, but the industry can be unpredictable. When Ruby was born, I tried to find something more stable, but jobs that pay enough to support a family and provide health insurance aren't as easy to come by as people think. When she started getting sick regularly, I had to miss work more and more often to take care of her, or try to find medical help we could afford." The explanation made heartbreaking sense to Charlie, who had always taken for granted the kind of job security and healthcare benefits that allowed people to weather temporary setbacks without losing everything they had worked to build. He was beginning to understand that Marcus's homelessness wasn't the result of laziness or poor decision-making, but rather the consequence of a series of unfortunate circumstances that could potentially affect anyone who lacked sufficient financial resources to absorb unexpected medical expenses or employment disruptions. "Ruby gets sick a lot?" Charlie asked, looking down at the little girl who was quietly listening to the adult conversation while continuing to practice writing letters on the concrete. "Respiratory problems, mostly," Marcus explained, his hand moving automatically to smooth Ruby's hair in a gesture of unconscious protection and comfort. "Something about her lungs that makes her susceptible to infections and breathing difficulties, especially during cold weather or when we can't find clean, dry places to sleep. I've taken her to emergency rooms more times than I can count, but without insurance, they just treat the immediate symptoms and send us away without addressing the underlying problems." Charlie felt a sharp pang of recognition as he absorbed this information. His own daughter had struggled with similar health issues during her early childhood, but he had been able to afford specialists, preventive treatments, and environmental modifications that had ultimately resolved most of her respiratory problems. The thought that Ruby was suffering from potentially treatable conditions simply because her father couldn't afford proper medical care struck him as fundamentally unjust. As they talked, Charlie began to appreciate the complexity of Marcus's situation in ways that his comfortable lifestyle had previously shielded him from understanding. Marcus had tried various assistance programs, but the requirements were complicated, waiting lists were long, and many programs risked separating children from parents who couldn't provide conventional housing. The constant threat of family separation hung over every decision Marcus made about seeking help. Over the following weeks, Charlie continued his evening detours, each time finding Marcus looking more worn down while somehow maintaining his devoted teaching routine with Ruby. The man's dedication was extraordinary, turning every surface into educational opportunities, every passing moment into learning experiences, despite his deteriorating health and their increasingly desperate circumstances as winter weather made street living even more challenging. Marcus was pushing himself far beyond reasonable limits. His persistent cough worsened with each passing night. His energy flagged visibly during their educational sessions, yet he refused to let Ruby's intellectual development suffer because of their housing instability or his declining health. Charlie watched this devoted father literally sacrificing his physical well-being to maintain some semblance of academic progress and emotional stability for his remarkable daughter. What amazed Charlie most was witnessing Marcus's natural teaching ability. This wasn't just a father trying to keep his child occupied or maintain basic academic skills. Marcus was providing Ruby with a comprehensive education that covered critical thinking, problem-solving, and intellectual curiosity that many children never developed even in well-funded schools. His methods were intuitive yet sophisticated, always meeting Ruby exactly where she was developmentally while gently challenging her to reach further. During one of their conversations, Marcus explained his educational philosophy with a clarity that revealed deep thinking about learning and child development. "Every child deserves to know that the world is full of fascinating things to discover," he told Charlie. "Ruby might not have toys or games like other children, but she has something more valuable, the understanding that learning itself is the greatest adventure she'll ever experience." Charlie began to understand that Marcus's commitment to Ruby's education went far beyond academic achievement. He was building his daughter's sense of self-worth, showing her that she was valuable enough to deserve patience, attention, and intellectual investment. In a world that had largely written them off as disposable, Marcus was creating a sanctuary of dignity and possibility that protected Ruby from internalizing society's dismissive attitudes toward homeless people. The turning point came one particularly cold November evening, when Charlie arrived to find their usual corner empty, except for a few scattered pieces of chalk and some cardboard that had been blown around by the wind. The father and daughter were nowhere to be seen, and Charlie felt a strange sense of alarm that surprised him with its intensity. He hadn't realized how much he'd come to look forward to these glimpses into their nightly routine, or how concerned he would become when their pattern was disrupted. Charlie spent nearly an hour searching nearby areas, driving slowly through alleys and checking doorways where homeless individuals sometimes sought shelter. When he finally located them, huddled in a recessed doorway 3 blocks away near the hospital district, his heart sank at what he discovered. Marcus was barely conscious, his body racked with fever and violent coughing fits that left him gasping for breath. Ruby was trying to keep him warm with their thin blanket while tears streamed down her small face. "Please help us," Ruby whispered when she saw Charlie approaching, her usual bright confidence replaced by the terror of a child who realized her only parent might be seriously ill. "Daddy won't wake up properly, and I don't know what to do. He's been getting sicker for days, but he kept saying we just needed to wait until morning, and he would feel better." Charlie immediately called for an ambulance while kneeling beside Marcus, whose breathing was severely labored and whose skin burned with dangerous fever levels. As they waited for medical assistance to arrive, Ruby clung to her father's hand with desperate determination, her small voice repeatedly saying, "Don't leave me, Daddy. Please don't leave me. I promise I'll be good. I promise I'll study hard. Just please don't go away." At the hospital, emergency room doctors diagnosed Marcus with severe pneumonia, complicated by exhaustion and malnutrition that had weakened his immune system's ability to fight the infection effectively. His condition was serious enough to require immediate intensive care, leaving Ruby temporarily in Charlie's care, a responsibility he accepted without hesitation, though he had no experience with traumatized children or any clear sense of what such care might involve. During Marcus's 2-week hospitalization, Charlie got his first real glimpse into the complexity of caring for an intelligent, traumatized 5-year-old who was trying to be brave while terrified of losing her only parent and protector. Ruby asked endless questions about her father's condition and treatment, tried to maintain her educational routines by practicing letters and numbers on paper Charlie provided, and struggled with nightmares about abandonment that left her crying inconsolably in the middle of the night. The experience opened Charlie's eyes to the emotional resilience that Ruby had developed during their months of homelessness. Despite her young age, she had learned to read adult moods and situations with remarkable accuracy, adapting her behavior to minimize stress on her father while maintaining her own sense of hope and curiosity about the world. Her maturity was both impressive and heartbreaking, a reminder of how quickly children could be forced to grow up when circumstances demanded it. "Will Daddy get better?" she asked Charlie one morning as they sat in the hospital waiting room, her small hand gripping his with surprising strength, while her eyes searched his face for honest reassurance rather than empty platitudes. "The doctors are doing everything they can," Charlie replied carefully, having learned that Ruby's intelligence meant she could detect evasion or false optimism immediately. "Your daddy is fighting very hard to get well and come back to you. He loves you more than anything in the world, and that love is helping him be strong during this difficult time." When Marcus finally recovered enough to leave the hospital, Charlie made a decision that surprised even himself with its immediacy and certainty. "Come stay at my house while you get your strength back," he offered. "I have a guest house that's been empty for years, just sitting there unused while I rattle around in a main house that's far too big for one person." Ruby needs stability while you heal, and you need somewhere you can focus on recovery without worrying about where you'll sleep each night." Marcus looked at Charlie with an expression that mixed gratitude with the wariness of someone who had learned to be suspicious of offers that seemed too generous or convenient. "Why would you do this for us?" he asked. "You don't know us, and we have no way to repay such generosity. What could you possibly gain from helping two strangers who have nothing to offer in return?" The question forced Charlie to examine his own motivations in ways he wasn't entirely prepared for. Why was he offering to help these particular strangers when he had driven past hundreds of other homeless individuals over the years without feeling compelled to intervene personally? What was different about Marcus and Ruby that had penetrated his usual emotional detachment from other people's problems? "Because I had a daughter once," Charlie heard himself saying, though the words surprised him as much as they seemed to surprise Marcus. "She died in a car accident 3 years ago, and she would be about Ruby's age now if she were still alive. I know what it means to love a child more than your own life, and I know what it feels like to be helpless when they're sick or in danger. I can't bring my daughter back, but I can help make sure Ruby doesn't lose her father when there's something I can do to prevent it." The admission hung between them like a bridge, connecting their shared experiences of parenthood, despite the vast differences in their circumstances and resources. Marcus's expression softened as he absorbed Charlie's unexpected vulnerability, while Ruby looked up at both men with the intuitive perception that children often display when sensing important emotional undercurrents in adult conversations. "I'm sorry for your loss," Marcus said quietly, his words carrying the weight of someone who understood grief and the way it could reshape a person's entire relationship with the world. "Losing a child must be the worst thing anyone could experience. I can't imagine surviving something like that." Charlie nodded, surprised by how much it helped to have his loss acknowledged by someone who clearly understood the depths of parental love and fear. "It changes everything about how you see other people's struggles," he admitted, "especially when it involves children who need help that their parents can't provide alone. I have resources that could make a difference in Ruby's life, and using them feels like a way to honor my daughter's memory." The shared recognition of their common humanity as fathers seemed to dissolve much of the social awkwardness that had characterized their previous interactions. Marcus was no longer just a homeless man accepting charity from a wealthy stranger. He was a fellow parent facing challenges that Charlie could understand even if he had never experienced them personally. "We would pay rent," Marcus said firmly, his voice growing stronger as he found a way to accept help while maintaining his dignity. "I'll find work, whatever kind of work you need done around your property or through your business connections. I won't accept charity, but I will accept the opportunity to earn a stable home for Ruby, while she gets the medical care she needs and I recover my health." Charlie nodded, recognizing the importance of self-sufficiency to Marcus's willingness to accept assistance. "I have extensive gardens and grounds that need maintenance," he said. "The work is steady but not overwhelming, and it comes with flexible hours that would allow you to take Ruby to medical appointments or handle other family responsibilities as needed." The months that followed transformed all their lives in ways none of them could have anticipated. Ruby thrived in the stable housing environment, with consistent medical care finally bringing her respiratory problems under control. Her natural intelligence flourished with access to books, educational materials, and most importantly, the security of knowing where she would sleep each night and wake each morning. Marcus gradually regained his strength while approaching his groundskeeping work with the same careful attention to detail that he brought to Ruby's education. The gardens began to show improvements that went far beyond basic maintenance, as Marcus applied both physical effort and creative problem-solving to landscaping challenges that previous gardening services had addressed only superficially. Their evening educational sessions continued, but now they took place in the comfortable guest house kitchen or on the covered patio, with proper lighting and seating that allowed for extended lessons without physical discomfort. Charlie found himself occasionally joining these study sessions, initially as an observer, but gradually as an active participant who enjoyed seeing familiar subjects through Ruby's fresh perspective and Marcus's innovative teaching methods. But as Ruby's health and happiness improved dramatically, Marcus began showing concerning new symptoms that worried everyone. Persistent fatigue that didn't improve with rest, unexplained pain that seemed to move through different parts of his body, and coordination problems that suggested something more serious than lingering effects from his pneumonia recovery. When Marcus finally agreed to additional medical testing, the results revealed devastating news. He had developed an aggressive form of cancer that required immediate and intensive treatment. The diagnosis was particularly cruel, coming so soon after their lives had finally stabilized and Ruby had begun to flourish in their new environment. Charlie immediately committed to supporting both Marcus and Ruby through whatever challenges the treatment process might bring, while Marcus focused primarily on ensuring Ruby's continued stability and educational progress regardless of his own prognosis. The cancer treatment period became a test of everyone's resilience, with Marcus enduring chemotherapy and radiation while trying to maintain his parental responsibilities, and Charlie learning to provide emotional support for a frightened child and determined father facing mortality. Throughout this ordeal, Ruby continued to demonstrate the remarkable adaptability that had characterized her response to every previous challenge in her young life. She learned to recognize when her father was having difficult treatment days and adjusted her behavior accordingly, while maintaining the academic progress and social development that had been their primary goals since accepting Charlie's offer of housing and employment. During Marcus's most challenging treatment phases, he spent considerable time making preparations for possibilities he didn't want to discuss directly with Ruby. Legal arrangements for her guardianship, detailed instructions about her educational needs and learning style, and conversations with Charlie about parenting approaches that had proven most effective in nurturing her remarkable intellectual gifts. She's going to need someone who understands that her intelligence is a gift that requires careful cultivation rather than simple acceleration. Marcus told Charlie during one of their planning discussions. She needs challenges that engage her creativity and curiosity, but she also needs time to be a child and develop the social and emotional skills that will serve her throughout her life. These conversations were emotionally difficult, but profoundly meaningful for both men, deepening Charlie's understanding of the responsibilities he was accepting and the importance of maintaining the educational and emotional approaches that had made Ruby such an extraordinary young person, despite the challenging circumstances of her early childhood. Marcus fought his illness with the same quiet determination he had brought to every other challenge in his life, experiencing periods of improvement that offered hope alternating with setbacks that reminded everyone how precarious his situation remained. During his final weeks, as it became clear that the cancer was progressing despite aggressive treatment, Marcus made a decision that would profoundly impact Charlie's understanding of gratitude, sacrifice, and the true meaning of friendship. Learning that Charlie was developing vision problems that could severely compromise his independence and ability to care for Ruby effectively, Marcus made arrangements to donate his corneas after death, ensuring that his friend would maintain the sight necessary to watch Ruby grow up and guide her toward whatever future her remarkable talents might create. When Charlie discovered these arrangements among Marcus's carefully organized papers, he was overwhelmed by such selfless generosity from someone who had already given so much to ensure his daughter's well-being. "Why would you do this?" Charlie asked when he confronted Marcus about the donation plans. "You don't owe me anything." "Everything I've done for you and Ruby has been because I wanted to help, not because I expected anything in return." Marcus smiled with the quiet dignity that had characterized all of their interactions since that first night when Charlie had stopped to give Ruby money for books and pencils. "You gave Ruby and me our lives back when we had lost everything," he said simply. "You provided safety when we had nowhere to turn, medical care when we couldn't afford treatment, and most importantly, you've loved us both with the kind of genuine care that has nothing to do with obligation or charity. This is my way of making sure you can continue watching over Ruby long after I'm gone." When Marcus's final day came, it was peaceful and surrounded by the love that had defined his relationship with both Ruby and Charlie. He spent his last conscious hours expressing pride in the remarkable young person Ruby was becoming, and gratitude to Charlie for the friendship that had made their final years together so much richer than anyone could have anticipated. 3 years after Marcus's death, Charlie sat with 8-year-old Ruby in the garden that her father had tended with such care during his final seasons of life. She was working through advanced mathematics problems with the same focused enthusiasm that Marcus had nurtured during those midnight sidewalk lessons that first captured Charlie's attention. The afternoon sun filtered through the trees Marcus had planted, casting gentle shadows across Ruby's notebook as she solved equations that would challenge students twice her age. Ruby looked up from her calculations, her bright eyes reflecting both her father's intelligence and the security that Charlie's love had provided throughout these years of healing and growth. The worry lines that had once marked her young face during their homeless days had long disappeared, replaced by the confident expression of a child who knew she was cherished and protected. "Mr. Charlie, do you think Daddy can see how well I'm doing in school?" she asked, her voice carrying the thoughtful tone that had become characteristic of her approach to life's deeper questions. Charlie smiled, his vision clear and strong thanks to Marcus's final gift of sight. He could see every detail of Ruby's face, every pencil mark on her paper, every leaf rustling in the garden that Marcus had created as a living testament to hope and beauty. "I know he can, sweetheart," Charlie replied, his voice warm with certainty. "Your father's love is always watching over you, just like mine always will be. And wherever he is, I think he's very proud of the wonderful person you're becoming." Ruby nodded solemnly, absorbing this reassurance with the wisdom that seemed to guide all her interactions with life's complexities. Then she returned to her mathematical work with quiet confidence, surrounded by love that transcended circumstances and would guide her toward whatever future her remarkable mind could imagine. The late afternoon breeze carried the scent of the flowers Marcus had planted in his final spring, a living reminder that love, once given freely, continues to bloom long after its source has passed into memory.